taught her to, 'cause the meaning makes you weak at the knees. Not to play with the brawl, 'cause the meaning makes you peace. Can you take me there to a new paradise? I get out this channel, where's where I've been tonight? And pick up me, I'm on the right. Can you take me there to paradise? Where I've been tonight, I'll pick up. I'm on the rise. Take me there to paradise, new paradise. Oh, when I say, when I need a release, I need the peace of self and to breathe. This is my new paradise. This is my new paradise. My new.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Why don't we all come in and grab seats and we'll get started. So my name is Scott Schell and I'd like to welcome you to the annual Northwest Snow and Avalanche Workshop known as INSAW. We're super excited to have this event back in person. It's been virtual the last 2 years. I suspect many of you have actually participated virtually. And you know, dating back to the beginnings of this event at the Old Mountaineers building on the flanks of Queen Anne 16 years ago, you know, INSAW has long been a place where the community can come together at the beginning of the season. We can reconnect with some of our partners and hopefully learn something and take something away that will benefit us with our backcountry experience. So I'd like to also take a moment to welcome all of you who are joining the event virtually. This is the first time in the history of INSAW that we've been able to run a simultaneous live stream along with an in-person event. So for those of you who are joining us virtually, I'd encourage you to participate using the chat feature, comments feature in YouTube. We've got several of our forecasters standing by to help engage with your questions and connect those to the presentations today. So please feel free, if there's something that comes up that you see, make sure you ask. And speaking of presenters, I'm super excited for our lineup today. Our time will be split into 3 sessions. And the first session is going to focus on the wintertime mountains. And the second session is going to be talking around making and communicating relevant observations. Our final session that's going to close out the day is going to focus on our changing mountain snowpack. And of course, INSAW would not be complete without our own state climatologist swinging by and giving us an update as to what the season looks like. And hopefully Nick's going to be able to speak to this crazy weather that we're having. Last night I was actually working on these notes, and it was 8 o'clock at night, and I live out in Snoqualmie, and it was 80 degrees. So we're definitely having some crazy weather, and I'm super excited to hear from Nick today what to expect. So regarding the presentations, I'd just like to talk us through a couple of logistics. I think everyone has the schedule. You were handed that today. But a quick reminder is that we're going to be taking a break at 11 o'clock. So we're going to go into our morning session, and then at 11 o'clock we'll have a break. And then we'll come back after the break, and then we'll be in our second session, and then lunch begins at 12:45. And regarding lunch, I'd like to invite you all downstairs for an opportunity to meet several of our forecasters and several other NWAC staff at our working lunch, which is really an opportunity for us to take a deeper dive, for us to give you all a chance to ask questions of us. And those questions could range from how's NWAC structured to using our forecast products to any sort of ranging questions around the backcountry and winter weather and those sorts of things. After lunch, we're going to come back together at around 2:15 for the afternoon sessions. And then there's something that I'm super excited about. At the end of the day, we're going to have a chance to show you, which will be the first public showing, of a little film that we've put together titled The Bottom Line. And the goal of that is to give everyone a sense of what goes into building an avalanche forecast and what our forecasters are doing while they're out in the field. So it should be a pretty cool opportunity to get to see that. We've been working on it this summer. It's being circulated through a couple of film festivals, but this will be the first time that it's actually being shown to people. And then after that, at 4 o'clock, we'd like to invite you downstairs to the community happy hour and have a drink on us, and we can continue more conversations. So during the presentations today, I'd like to ask you all to hold your questions until the end of the presentation. We've built in time to the schedule for each presenter to be able to have an opportunity to interact with questions. But I want you to hold those questions. We've got a collection of volunteers that are going to be spaced throughout the venue here. And when you have a question, we'd like you to just hold your hand up and keep your hand up, and we'll get a mic out to you. It's really important that when you ask questions, that the questions are actually mic'd so that everyone here in this audience can hear, along with everyone participating virtually will be able to hear and understand your question. But before the show, I'd just like to take a minute to thank everyone who's put a lot of work into this event. First, I'd like to start with the staff who've put a tremendous amount of work and effort to pulling this event off. I'd also like to give a shout out to the over 30 volunteers who are here today making this event happen. So thank you. I'd also like to thank all of our sponsors that are supporting this event today. Without these organizations supporting NSAW and supporting the Northwest Avalanche Center, an event like this just can't happen. So during the breaks today and lunch, I'd like you to stop by. All the sponsors are down on this side underneath, and I'd like you to just go and check them out, have a conversation about some of the new products and things that are out there. We also have a pretty cool raffle. So at the NWAC table, you can purchase raffle tickets. And then the raffle tickets are for the different items are actually at each vendor. So you can choose the item in which you're interested in competing for. And finally, I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time on this beautiful day, warm day, and whether that's actually sitting here or doing it virtually. And I also want to just give you another reminder that NWAC is a community-supported avalanche center. And it is members and supporters and people like you all here today that are making everything that we do happen. So now I would like to bring up Josh Hirshberg. For each of our sessions today, we will have a moderator who's going to help introduce each of the speakers and will help guide the Q&A session at the end of the talks. Josh Hirshberg has been a forecaster for 5 years. I think he's going into his 6th year. He currently lives in Leavenworth, and he's responsible for forecasting for our east-north zone, which is like the kind of the Winthrop northeast Cascades area, and then Stevens Pass. So come on up, Josh. Thanks.
Thanks, Scott. I just wanted to take a second and recognize how excellent it is that we can all be here together, and great to see some familiar faces in the crowd. So thanks everyone for coming out. Really awesome to be here in person. So our first presenter is Dennis D'Amico. Dennis is NWAC's forecasting director, and along with Scott Schell, these two work really hard to iron out a lot of behind-the-scenes details that allow the rest of us at NWAC to do our jobs. Dennis is going to provide some details that you can, and updates that you can expect as we roll into this next winter. Welcome, Dennis.
Okay, hi everyone. I just echo that this is maybe not the most excited about public speaking, but this is better than talking into a computer screen with no one on the other side. So I'll take it. So my job is to give you just kind of some highlights that you can expect from the Forecast Center for this upcoming season. And we can't get it all, but we're going to hit a couple of topics here. Forecast staff updates, who's new, who's leaving, our snowmobile program, weather forecasting. We're going to take a little deeper dive into weather stations, and then some important dates as we roll into the winter season here. So I'm really pleased to announce that we have 10 wintertime staff for this season. 9 of those forecasters are returning. Many of them have been here for several years, so we've got a really good core of members here that are dedicated to keeping you all safe in the backcountry. And you can see there's one empty box up there. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. And I just thought I'd just highlight quickly the Forecaster series that's on the bottom. If you're looking for a little bit more of an intimate evening, getting to know the local forecaster in your zone, check out those dates coming up. Sign up, come have a beer with us. We're going to be at Seattle, Bellingham, Mazama, Portland, and Leavenworth. So I hope you can, if you're interested, you can take a little more time and meet some of your local forecasters. So on maybe a sadder note, one of our longtime forecasters, Andrew Kiefer, he's been with us for 4 seasons, is moving on to greener pastures outside the avalanche industry. And I just wanted to take a second and thank Andrew. He's been really an instrumental building block to building our field forecasting program. And I think I could highlight lots of good things about Andrew. You know, he was just so dedicated every single season. But I think just in the context of the rest of our staff, Andrew really had a big impact in the motorized community and just connecting with motorized users. So that's a little bit of the bad news. Sorry to see Andrew go. I think on the positive side, we have a new forecaster for the Mount Hood zone primarily. We will be able to announce that forecaster next week, and what I can tell you is this forecaster is super excited to work for NWAC, and we're super excited to have them on board starting off this season. Okay, onto the snowmobile program. We've had a strong partnership with Clems the last several years. Dallas was actually down at Wausau, down at Puyallup yesterday, and got to talk to Clem, and he's really committed to getting 6 snowmobiles back in front of our forecasters this year. We're going to have 2 that we own as well. So we're going to have 8 sleds, 1 for each field-based forecaster. And it wasn't too long ago that we didn't have any sleds, at least available on a regular basis. So this continues to have a huge impact on our program. We're able to respond to avalanche accidents, both investigations and just in a timely manner. It's obviously just a direct connection with the motorized community. And then finally, you know, we can get observations. This benefits everyone. We can get observations further afield than just human-powered with the access to those sleds. So big shout out to Clems, and thank you again for supporting the Avalanche Center. I'm going to just touch briefly on weather forecasting, what's new for this year. We've been experimenting here at NWAC with some different weather forecast subscriptions. And what that really means is we have access to more web-based tools than we've had year over year. Some of them are paid, some of them are not paid. I think some of the key benefits for them are we have access to more ensemble forecast guidance than we've ever had before, giving us different looks and ways to interpret weather forecasts than just the deterministic model. So that's been key to start to build into our forecast program. And then one of the services we're using this year is the same that Avalanche Canada uses internally. So we kind of bring these things on in an experimental fashion. We try to work them into our program as the season goes along and see what tools can really help us deliver better weather forecasts, not just for the public and our partners, but both internally that help steer the avalanche forecast. So I'm excited about that. And probably the last point is just the ability to have more remote forecast tools available to us. We are a decentralized organization. We've got forecasters working all through the Washington Cascades in Northern Oregon, and everybody on our staff has access to these tools. So I think that's kind of the three main benefits to this as we learn and experiment more year over year. And then finally, Matt Promomo, who's not here today, but is an integral part of our program. Matt has been training with the weather forecast program here at NWAC, and you're going to start to see his name on more and more weather products going into this year as a part-time weather forecaster. So let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into weather stations. If anybody can remember back to May when it was still felt like winter, we had a fundraising drive, and the focus this year was on weather stations. How can we do more? How can you are you interested in supporting us? And I love the graphic that the team came up with where we exceeded our goals and we went right to the top of the tower. So that was a really great and fun fundraising to see everyone respond to that ask back in May. And because we know that you're using all of our different weather station products, whether you're a professional, recreationist, we know that's part of NWAC, why you come to us. So I think just to kind of like, what were we doing? What did we do with some of those extra funds? Well, we had Andy Harrington, who's our lead weather station technician, really take the last couple of years of experience that he's and learning that he's built up over the program, and he got to apply that quite a bit this season. When I edited up the other day, I was kind of shocked that we had 20 individual site visits since last year. That's pretty good. We've had hundreds of hours of staff time, and that goes into labor, programming, equipment procurement, data management, and finally, this kind of back of the napkin calculation, but I think we've probably deployed at least over $10,000 of new equipment to the field. So updated sensors, new sensors, data loggers, all that kind of fun stuff that makes those weather stations tick. So I just want to take a second here. Andy, if you can stand up for a second. Let's give him a round of applause. Okay, now that I've embarrassed Andy, let's move on to what else we're working on. So I think a lot of the focus the last couple of years has been to take this really great network of weather stations that we run with other partners with like WashDOT and ski areas, National Park Service, and try to bring it up to a maintainable level, make sure our programming is tight, our connections are good, our equipment is up to date, and really start to, I think the next phase is starting to look forward. How can we expand? Where are there data gaps? What do we need to do? So I think I wanted to focus on one of our other forecasters, Irene Henninger. I know Irene's here today. Every forecaster will tell you their zone is unique, and they have a lot of challenges, whether it's snowpack or topography or access. And I think with Irene's challenge with the West Central Zone, which includes the Mountain Loop Highway, there's no major highways going through there. There's no ski areas. We know people are getting out. It's just not easy to access the train there. And there's just a big data gap. That map I've got on the right, those orange stations are stations that are within the NWAC network. And there's 80 miles as the crow flies between Mount Baker and Stevens Pass. So there are weather stations in the zone. They're not great. They're not in the places you'd really want data. And there's a lot of mountains and a lot of avalanche terrain. So I remember Irene on her first season forecasting for West Central. It was probably March or so. She called me up and she said, yeah, we need some weather stations in the zone. I said, we do. I said, where should we put them? And she's taken the last 2 seasons to kind of really learn the zone and then also map out where could a weather station go. When anyone comes up to me and they say they want to put a weather station somewhere, you've got to start with the basics. How's it going to be powered? Can we access the site? Helicopters are not off limits. Mark Moore's here. They've used helicopters before. I think that's not where we want to start from a cost perspective. And I think the last part is communications. How do we talk to the station and make sure that we can get data reliably? We are a smaller organization. This isn't NASA. We don't have unlimited funds. So that's where we start. And I think, Irene really put in a good backbone to figuring out where's their access, where are spots that can overlap with data that we actually want and could be useful for potential weather stations in the future. So I've got a little pop-up on the map there, and Irene made a couple of notes and included Dream Spot near White Chuck. So let's see how it's going. Andy and I have made 2 trips to the White Chuck area, about 8 miles east-southeast of Darrington in the last month, scouting for a new site. We've got several contenders. We're looking for something that's around 5,000 feet in elevation, and our primary objectives for what we can actually measure with a solar-powered instrument. It's going to be snow depth, air temperature, relative humidity. There's going to be some other sensors on there, hopefully as well, but those are those 3 primary ones. And I think the main part is that this is going to be a new setup at least for the Northwest Avalanche Center. We're looking at a more portable structure, a tripod, and that's one that's going to have a minimal environmental impact, and one that we can move around, frankly, if it's a poor site. So what could go wrong? We've got, this is just a short list here. The site could be a poor site. We've already had weather delays with equipment shipping. That picture on the right is what happens sometimes when snow keeps pushing on things year after year. It can bend towers, metal. There's literally a fire. You can see one drainage up, and then we're going to probably start, raining and snowing next week. So we're short on time. There's vandalism, communication issues. I think, we're not quite there yet, but we're certainly working in that direction. And then just to kind of tie it together, we want a new weather station in a data sparse area within the next, by next season. This White Chuck station might work out, it may not. But really what we're trying to develop is the building blocks for a more flexible option. Not that we're not going to continue with our current setup of weather stations, but something that we can deploy and get set up a little bit more nimble than maybe what we've done in the past. We want to secure year-round staffing to manage the weather station program. And finally, this isn't quite as exciting, but behind the scenes, we are working to streamline how we manage the weather station database, and then also those visualizations, those tables, those graphs, all that stuff that everyone in this room uses. So I'm just going to close up with some important dates to leave you with. If you're here, you're probably interested when we're going to start forecasting. Our entire forecast staff is back. We're back up to 10 on Monday, October 24th. We've got 3 to 4 weeks before we start producing scheduled products. That will start with kind of our early season ramp up in mid-November. We typically start around Thanksgiving. That is conditions-based. We've had a couple late starts the last 2 years, which means we're definitely due for an earlier start this year. And then we'll go to the second, the mid to late April as we usually do. So with that in mind, La Nina Part 3, you'll have to stay tuned for Nick Bond later today. And with that in mind, I'd like to hand it back to Scott Schell here.
Dennis just mentioned that this is photos from yesterday. Thanks, Dennis, for walking us through all the goings-on at the forecast side. It's really interesting. Just not that many years ago, there was very little capacity at the Avalanche Center during the summer. In fact, most of us only worked, somewhere between 7 and 9 months. It was a complete ghost town in the summer. And then a mad scramble in the fall to kind of get everything set up, get the forecast operations prepared. The nonprofit staff was cranking, figuring out what to do for membership and events and those sorts of things. And now it's just kind of a mad dash all the way from last year through the summer into the fall again. So it's pretty cool to see how things have changed and evolved at NWAC over the last few years. I just want to walk you through a handful of programmatic updates that focus around education and outreach and some of our events. So back again this year is Trailhead Outreach. We'll be increasing the capacity of that program, and we'll be launching into a research project. But Charlotte's going to spend some time today walking us through that. One thing that's pretty cool with NWAC is we do a lot of awareness classes. So we do, historically, we've done several hundred free awareness classes throughout the Northwest, which is kind of like the introductory or primer type class that would set people up for a level 1. These are finally going back to in-person this year, so we're really excited to be bringing back in-person Avalanche education to the Northwest. We'll also have a virtual option. Also kind of new is a collaboration between us, several other Avalanche centers in the US, and Avalanche Canada to try to sync up introductory awareness level education. And so we're taking the Know Before You Go program that came out of Utah, and we're taking it to the next level. So we'll be launching, and some stuff has already launched, a suite of videos. There's a longer film that'll be debuting at some of the film festivals. There's also a really cool e-learning module that's being built and launching. So there's some really cool stuff that's happening in the avalanche awareness world. Back again is unique programming that we've been doing, kind of a focus on unmet needs, both in our area and nationally. So we've got the Women's Mentorship Program coming back again. The applications are actually currently open for that. We're expanding some youth education and an ambassador program. And then our Professional Observer Program is taking a pretty significant evolution this year, working at kind of slotting it into the avalanche forecasting profession in a more intentional way to give people actually kind of the lower rung on the career ladder to kind of become a forecaster, which is something that the industry is missing. Also, back again this year is the Backcountry Bulletin, which is a weekly e-newsletter that you can subscribe to. There's some really cool information that's found on this in the bulletin that's actually unique to the bulletin and not found on the website. So if you're not already subscribed, I would encourage you to do so. There's a ton of other things happening at NWAC, in which that is really the reason that we've got the working lunch, would be to give you all an opportunity to ask questions and we can take a deeper dive. One little teaser is that we are working on a new mobile app this year. Yeah, thank you. It's been something that we've long been discussing, and we had an app a handful of years ago and have let that sunset, and now we are we're back to building one. And in fact, the goal is to have a workable internal beta app this year, and then hoping to roll it out about a year from now for you all. So it should, we're hoping it'll drastically shift the user experience with our forecasts and weather data and observations. So we can spend some time at lunch and answer your questions on that. And I think we're probably going to be out of question time, right, Josh? So I think I will just now turn it over to Josh, and we'll see you downstairs for lunch. Thanks.
So yeah, if you enjoyed that presentation and have other questions for us about NWAC operations, or even just what we do as forecasters or what we do in outreach with members, feel free to join us for the working lunch. So our next presenter is Amy Jenkins. Amy is a Jackson, Wyoming-based snowmobiler and ambassador for the All-American Heroes Foundation. She's going to present about how she overcame a life-changing accident and became an adaptive backcountry athlete. She'll also highlight how her efforts to help veterans and first responders to get into the backcountry, to learn avalanche education, and to do this as a means to cope with stress injuries and promote mental health and well-being. Welcome, Amy.
Thanks. How's everybody doing? Yeah, woo! All right. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of give you guys just a little bit more background, but thanks, Justin, for the great introduction. I've been recreating in the backcountry for a little over 10 years. I just absolutely, there's no feeling like it. You know, I think everybody knows that. You get that little tingling feeling and you're just grinning ear to ear. I moved to Jackson and was supposed to be there for only 2 years, and all it took was one ride there, and I knew that I was home. And November will be 13 years I've been there. I've done some volunteer work in the snowmobile industry. I belong to the Jackson Hole Snow Devils, and we put on the World Championship Hill Climb every year. I was with the Wyoming State Snowmobile Association for 4 years, and I was the vice president for 2, where we were lobbying for backcountry access and to keep everything open. I've also been with the Pink Ribbon Riders for 12 years, where we do a big ride every year and we raise money for breast cancer patients in Wyoming. All the money that we raise goes to patients that are dealing with breast cancer in Wyoming. And I also am with the All-American Heroes Foundation. I'll do a deeper dive into that, though, a little bit later. But I would like to kind of give you guys my story of what happened. So I was with a couple friends, and we had a plan to go out to Granite Hot Springs, and it was a night ride. So we were going to just be on the trail because we wanted to wake up and get fresh tracks in the snow the next day. We got waylaid a little bit, but we were out in the parking lot, and we had a plan. The weather was nice and clear, and it was just supposed to be a nice, easy 10-mile ride in. Well, you know, things change. We get to about 3 miles in, and we are just absolutely socked in. The storm that was supposed to hit later that night hit us while we were on the trail. All I could think about was we need to stop. We need to talk about the weather at the 5-mile mark, where we always would stop and talk about things. And the next thing I knew, I woke up in the hospital, and in the ICU, actually. So I had a lot of injuries. They weren't, all of them weren't apparent immediately, but I had lacerated my liver. I had broken my humerus in 9 spots. I had shattered my hand and broken 3 ribs, I think. And I had a gash, pretty good gash in my leg that required staples and stuff. I still remember thinking, man, does this mean I don't get to ride tomorrow? Laying there in the ICU. So, you know, things just went wrong, but everybody I was with did a great job of getting me out. I don't really remember any of the actual accident, but what we can kind of, you know, piece together, and this is just some pictures of everything, if you're kind of squirmish. But we think what happened is I was coming around a corner, I couldn't see, my right ski clipped the tree, I went over the handlebars, and my shoulder took most of the impact, and it went backwards, and I went forward, and that's how the hand and the humerus and everything shattered. Looking at my helmet was a very, very eye-opening, very, very scary moment to see the chip in the visor and just how close I was to probably snapping my neck, and maybe not making it out of this alive. My friends noticed that my headlight wasn't behind them, so they came around and they found me, I guess, on my back in the middle of the trail like a turtle. And so I was moving around, I guess, and so they figured that it was safe enough to try and get me out. We had no service, no sat phone. Honestly, weren't that prepared to be in this situation. So I was moving my head around. They figured it was safe enough to get me on the snowmobile and get me out. And that's what they did. And then it was about a 30-minute drive until we had cell phone service. And they called the hospital. They let them know what was going on, and they got me there. There was no way a helicopter could land. I mean, they just had to make a snap decision for the moment. So I just remember waking up, and I had all these injuries, and it was about, I think a week later when I started to realize that I didn't have any feeling in my fingers at all. And my doctors were like, well, you have a brachial plexus injury, and there's 5 nerves that come out of your spinal cord that make your arm do everything it does in your fingers. He told me that there was a possibility that I had stretched some nerves and that in a few months it could come back. So a few months go by and I'm still nothing, no feeling at all. And I had some MRIs done and they just really couldn't get some good imaging. So I went to the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota where they have an actual brachial plexus institute. And man, that was intimidating. I'm in there, I'm meeting with 12 doctors all in this small room, and they're throwing out all these terms and everything, and I have no idea what's going on. I'm just kind of in a fog. Thank goodness my mom was with me. But in the end, they were able to do some more in-depth imaging that showed that I had completely ripped 3 of the nerves right out of the spinal cord. So that was the day I found out, okay, I'm never gonna have the use of my arm again. We decided to do what was called a muscle transfer surgery. It was about a 13-hour surgery, and I mean, they filleted me open from neck all the way to ankle. They cut me from the back of the knee to the ankle on both sides and took the sural nerves. And then they cut me from here to here and took the gracilis muscle. And then they sewed everything onto the clavicle, redid some nerve work for the ribs up to the clavicle, and then it was just a waiting game. They said it takes about a year to a year and a half, before you would even know if the surgery worked. But I was willing to do it because it was gonna give me some up and down motion and some gravity open and close with my hand. So I thought, let's do this. I might be able to grab some things or do things, So about halfway through, about a year and a half in, it was starting to work. They told me one day there's 1 trigger out of 5 that will help you know if it's working. And I will tell you, I was breathing one day and all of a sudden my arm just went like this. And I looked down and I was just like, oh my God, this is so cool. And I'm in the mirror and I'm just taking deep breaths and I'm watching my arm go up and down. And I mean, I just stood there, I'm sending my mom videos and it was just kind of really, and it was just crazy. I couldn't believe it. So the more and more I was practicing and things like that, I was meeting with my doctors and getting a physical therapy plan together and all of that. And then they told me that I was gonna have to be very, very careful with it because there was still no feeling in the arm. And then if I was ever to straighten the arm, anything like that, I could rip all that work that they did off the clavicle. And so I decided to meet with my doctors and I was like, has anyone ever opted for amputation? halfway through this process. I know you spent a lot of time and a lot of effort to try and help me get the use of the arm back a little bit, but I'm still very active. You know, I'm still riding snowmobiles, you know, I like to wake surf, I mean, I just like to hike, everything. And I was just worried about, you know, catching it in a door or a car handle or anything like that and just ripping all of that off and how painful that would be, you know, to have to go through another accident. And they said, you know, it's not very common, but they said your lifestyle is very different from a lot of the people that we see. So I took about 6 months, you know, thinking and, you know, going over every scenario possible of why this would be a good idea to go ahead and amputate. And I'll never forget a friend of mine who's also a backcountry rider who's missing his left arm. His nickname is Lefty. He called me up one day and he was like, so, he's like, it's been about 6 months. He's like, what are you gonna think when people, you know, when you amputate and their opinion of you? And I was like, when have I ever cared what anyone has had to say about me, you know? I'm like, I just do my thing and here I go. And he's like, oh, you're totally ready to do it. So I then, you know, got with my orthopedic doctor in Jackson, and I said, this is what I'm thinking. I'm like, I really, really, really think it's going to be best to go ahead and amputate. And I'll tell you, it's going to sound absolutely weird, but it was the best thing I've ever done because it didn't hold me back from there. I had a lot of ups and downs during the whole process, just because I couldn't snowmobile. I couldn't do anything. And I was like, it's another surgery. It's physical therapy. I was like, I just want to be on a snowmobile again. And so, you know how we all have that one friend who's kind of crazy. I had a buddy that was like, well, what are you going to do with the arm once they amputate? And I was like, well, I was like, I didn't really think about that. So I asked my doctor, I was like, so what happens? You know, what do you do with it? And he was like, you know, that's actually a very common question. He goes, there's about 8 different things that you could do. And so he kind of started naming everything off. And when he got to the part where I could donate my arm to train cadaver dogs for the backcountry, I was like, that's it. I was like, that's what I got to do. So, you know, I mean, it was definitely a crazy process. It was a very long, 2 years. You know, I had moments where I was locked in the bathroom just in tears, I was like, I don't know if I can make it through this. This is really difficult. I was like, I felt really helpless for a while. But, once I got past the amputation and everything like that, I decided it was time to learn how to ride again and change the way I recreate. I definitely was one of those people that we went riding, we weren't prepared. We had, transceivers, we had probes, we had shovels. But did we really know how to use it? Did we actually, practice a beacon check in the parking lot? We were really kind of pushing the limits and not in a good way. So it kind of opened my eyes, that I needed to definitely change what I was doing. It's kind of funny because the picture on the bottom was the very first time I was ever out on a snowmobile again after my accident. And I'll tell you what, I just went in circles. And I was the happiest girl ever because I was out there. So it's been kind of a process, and I've been, learning and growing and getting better, and I'm finally back to a level, of riding of when I had 2 hands. So I decided to get with my crew and just discuss, the way we were riding and what we were doing. And, that led to, all right, let's take some intro Avi classes. Let's do the right thing. Let's have the right gear. Did we have, the right first aid equipment when we were back there? So that led us to, signing up for some classes and going out and, I hadn't been through Area 1 yet, but we were going out and we were actually practicing scenarios and, with a large group of people. And that led to our club getting a beacon check station for Grays River Road in Alpine, Wyoming. And that has been kind of growing, and the other local clubs have been getting involved and trying to get more beacon check stations. And And we tell people, cell phones off in the parking lot, and then we ride in just where we're not going to be near any other equipment, and we do a beacon check, and we get everybody out, and everybody goes into search mode, and we go around, and, we just found that it's really important to have that awareness when you're going into the backcountry. I upgraded my gear, I didn't have the best gear to be stuck out in the backcountry overnight if something happened. It just really changed the way that, I did things. But it definitely helped being in the backcountry. I wasn't having as many of those down days that I was before. So a few years in, I've been upgrading sleds, upgrading equipment, and, totally just loving life, and things are starting to happen. Well, my mom had cervical cancer, and then right after had breast cancer. And so about 6 months after that, I decided that, okay, I just turned 40, like it's time, I gotta get in there, I gotta get a test done. It's obviously in my family now. So I had an appointment scheduled for February, and sure enough, I got stuck down 30 miles from my appointment because they closed the canyon for avalanche slides. So I called him up and said, I'm gonna go ahead, I need to move this appointment, but I'll let you know. And I kept pushing it off, pushing it off. Finally, in October, I was like, oh man, I have got to get in here and get this done. And sure enough, my very first mammogram ever, they find a lump. And I went in to have it biopsied, and they found a second one. And I'm going, there's no way. I was like, I just went through this with my mom. I was like, I'm 40 years old. I was like, no way. Sure enough, I got the phone call, and I had breast cancer. I was like, okay, I just got through amputation and a life-altering accident, and now I got to go through this. I was like, what am I going to do? And COVID hit. I ended up having a double mastectomy with a full reconstruction. And I was completely isolated for a year during COVID because of the breast cancer. I had lots of complications. I was in and out of the hospital. At one point, they weren't sure I was going to even be able to keep the implants. And I was like, triple amputee at 40. I was like, okay, that's pretty heavy. So I was able to get through that, and I went through 2 years of no riding in the backcountry, and I was just chomping at the bit. And so finally, last year, I got back out there, and it saved my life. I'd been going through counseling because the ups and downs of all the other stuff, and it was helping, but the minute I got out there with my friends and just out in the backcountry, it saved my soul. But after all of this, it just kind of left me thinking, I need to do something. I need to be more involved again, and I need to find something that's going to help me make a difference. And I happened to meet Aaron McCarthy, who's actually local to the Washington area, and he reached out to me, and I was with the fire department for 7 years in Henderson, Nevada, and since my amputation, I didn't really, I wanted to be with search and rescue and do some of that stuff, and then the accident happened. So Aaron reached out to me. He had started a foundation called the All American Heroes Foundation. And he said the whole purpose was to find veterans and first responders that were dealing with PTSD and get them out into the backcountry, give them avalanche awareness, and do a riding clinic and see if we can help them with their PTSD. And so I was like, that is absolutely, I love the idea. I think it's pretty amazing. And he's like, I said, how did you find me? And they were about to give away a sled to a veteran first responder. And he said, you were nominated by a couple people, for the sled. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's absolutely incredible. And so he said, but we've decided that we're going to go with someone else. And I was like, that's completely and utterly okay. But he invited me to be a board member and be more involved with the process. And I said, I would absolutely love to do that. And so we did our very first School for Heroes this year. And we went to Sealy Lake, Montana. We took 12 veterans and put them through an Area 1 avalanche course, and then we did a 2-day riding clinic with them. And I was able to be a part of that in January, and it was life-changing. You know, I hadn't been on a sled in 2 years, and I got out there, I was a little uncomfortable, I felt like I was fumbling around, and I was getting frustrated and down on myself, and a little bit later that night, I felt like I was holding the group up, you know, these guys are trying to learn, and here I am just, you know, fumbling around. And one of the guys came up to me later that night, and he's like, "I'm so glad you're here, Amy." He's like, "I was up on the hill, and I was just thinking, I can't do this. I don't think I can go through this Area 1 avalanche course. I'm not a good enough rider." He's like, and then I look over, and there you are, buzzing up a hill, and he's like, "Well, if Amy can do it, I can do it." And it just took all that worry and all that stress off my shoulders of getting down on myself, and I'm like, we're all here together, we're team building, you know. And the bond that I've created with these guys, it's incredible. We're on a group text. I've stayed in contact with every single one of them. I got to see one of them yesterday at the snow show. And then, you know, they're doing big things too. They just put together their own fundraiser, and they released videos on social media, and they raised, I think it was over $5,000, and they donated all that money back to the All-American Heroes Foundation so that we could put more veterans through school, you know, and get them the proper gear and the proper training. It was pretty incredible. So we restructured things a little bit this year, though, what we're going to do. We decided that maybe it was a little bit much to throw Area 1 at them right off the bat, you know, because most of these guys have never ridden before. So what we're going to do is we're going to do some scholarships this year, and we'll do a few days of avalanche introduction, and then we'll put them through a riding clinic. And if it's helping with their PTSD and they really enjoy it and they like it, then we'll go ahead and we'll put them through Area 1 at a later date, or Area 2, you know. All the guys that went through the first school are going to go through Area 2 with us this year, so that's pretty exciting as well. And so it's just really neat to be a part of something bigger, and, you know, these guys or women come home and, you know, they have to deal with the stress of being in war and all of that, and if I can be a small part of helping change that, it's pretty special. So I'd like to just show you guys our very first winner was Mylin Shu, and she is a veteran, and she's also in school right now to become a flight nurse. So she was our very, very first Nominated Heroes winner. And she's done a lot of great things with us over the last year and stuff. So it was really special to be able to give her one a couple years ago. And then we gave one to Josh Callahan this last March, who's also a veteran. And he stayed on too to help us do some, you know, rides this upcoming winter and everything. Very, very, very deserving people. And to just watch their family and their faces when, you know, because we bring them, you know, and we tell them that, you know, they're one of the, you know, nominees of the finalists and everything, and so they're not sure if they're going to get it, and then we just make the announcement, and I mean, just watching them go through that whole process is just, it's really, really, really cool. So this is a picture of our whole group of veterans that we put through. Thought it was kind of fun, and I just really can't wait to be a part of it. This year too. The bond is really great. But I would like to open things up to questions, just because I just want to hear some dialogue and see what you guys want to know. So if Justin, you can come help me do that, I would love it. Just because I'd rather, now that you know the story, I'd rather interact with you guys and hear what you got to say.
Thanks so much, Amy. That was great. Really interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any questions from the crowd here? Looks like we got one over there.
Okay.
Thanks so much for, it's really Thanks so much for sharing your story. I was just curious, is that program that you're running, is it nationwide or is it just in Wyoming? Or how can people get involved?
I have some business cards with me, but no, it is nationwide. And so we have some printable scholarship forms. We have things that you can download, but I can give you my card. You can go to our website and check it out. But yeah, so if you know a veteran first responder that wants, to be involved or anything like that, and we put a bunch of rides together. We have the dates up on our website and stuff because we're all over. We do stuff in Colorado. We do stuff in Sealy Lake, Montana. I think we're going to be doing something in Wyoming as well, but yeah, it's definitely, right now it's more West Coast, but we do have a few people that we keep in contact with on the East Coast as well. So, I mean, we're open to anyone coming in and joining and that wants to be a part of it. Yeah.
Any adoptive equipment modifications to your sled and your gear?
So I have to make sure with my Avi pack, it was difficult to find a pack because I need a right-handed pull so that I'm going across my body. But I was able to team up with Arva last year because theirs is reversible. And so I think a lot more companies are going to that. But that was my challenge in the beginning. My sled was pretty easy. We just took the thumb throttle and swapped it around to the left. And so my thumb and my brake are on the same side. And then I do put a small pull, I take a bicycle brake actually, and do it underneath the right handle. And that's just for like emergencies. I mean, if I get to the end of the day and I'm really tired and I have to side hill on my bad side, it comes in handy to swap sides and just be able to lean back and use that thumb throttle or that pull throttle on this side. But that's really the only modifications that I did. It's these new snowmobiles, the chassis are so great that it's a lot of just weight distribution. I mean, you barely lean and the sled will do what you want it to do. It was definitely a lot harder learning to ride in the beginning because everything was really stiff and you really had to throw your body weight around and jump around. But those are the only modifications that I had to do. Going through Area 1 was really interesting because I wasn't exactly sure where I fit in a rescue situation. And so going out and actually doing that and learning, I'm probably not the best one to shovel. I'm probably going to be the one you want to hop on a sled and go call for help or something like that. I'm great in a beacon search. But some of those other physical aspects, I really just learned that I had to know my limitations, and so all the people I ride with know that, and it's great because we form a plan if something were to go wrong of what's going to do, what's going to happen beforehand so that we know, that, I'm not going to be the one right up front. But, and that was hard for me. It was really hard to kind of admit that I had limitations, but if we're trying to save someone's life that's in our group, it's important to know that, so.
Looks like we have time for one more question.
Okay.
In front there.
Thanks for sharing your story, very inspirational. I was curious about the connection with PTSD recovery and these activities. What aspect of it is most sort of therapeutic for these folks? Is it the connection to people? Is it being outside? Is it something a little different for everyone?
I think it's a little bit different for everyone, but I think it's all of those things. We get them out there, we show them how to recreate, and once you see them, it starts to click that they're learning how to ride this sled. I mean, they're just happy, and I think it just helps them. We are trying to find a way to help these guys with an aftercare program because we get them for a week, and then what happens when they go back to real life? And so we are trying to find some avenues to help connect that. But even just this group text that I'm on with these guys, if they're having a down day or anything, they reach out, because we did create such a strong bond. And, just talking it through sometimes for them is really therapeutic. But I just think, when they get out there and everything just starts to fall in place and click, you can just see how it's just helping them. I mean, and that's what it did for me. Some days I get frustrated and things like that, but at the end of the day, it's just like I was so happy. You look around, and you guys know how it is, all that terrain in front of you. I mean, it's just breathtaking. And it just helps clear your mind, and I mean, I just feel like it heals my soul when I'm out there, and I could see that happening for those guys. It was really cool. So, and I'm just so happy to be a part of it. So,
Thanks so much, Amy.
thanks.
It's an amazing.
Thank you. Well, thanks.
And Amy will be around if you want to find her during the breaks at all. She'll be able to answer other questions. So thanks so much for your participation. So our next presenter is Charlotte Gard. Charlotte has worked with NWAC since 2016, and she currently oversees our education, outreach, and membership programs. She's going to present on how we at NWAC have reached backcountry users through our Trailhead outreach program. Welcome, Charlotte.
Thanks. My presentation today, Meet at the Trailhead, is about NWAC's Trailhead Outreach Program. So the goal is to give you just a bit of an overview of how the program has evolved, how it started, some updates that are coming this year that Scott already alluded to, as well as some ways that you, everyone here in the audience, can be a participant in Trailhead Outreach. So rather than giving you a brief overview myself, I figured I can let this neat volunteer-made video featuring our very own Katie Wicks, NWAC's Membership and Communications Coordinator, do it for me. If it's play.
I'm Katie Wicks, and we're here today doing some Trailhead outreach. When we do Trailhead outreach, our goal is really just to connect with the communities, make sure people are aware of the avalanche forecast, and then gather some survey data as well. We just have the avalanche forecast for people, and then while we're out here, we just count how many people are going into the backcountry, what mode of travel they're using, just to learn a little bit more about the community. I'm
Katie's worst nightmare that I just play this video on repeat. So like she said in this video, we set up this tent. It's pretty simple in concept. We have this 10 by 10 pop-up that we set up at trailheads around the Washington Cascades and Mount Hood. And the primary goal of it is general awareness. So we're just trying to reach people that aren't already familiar with NWAC's tools, or those that just aren't incorporating it in their day-to-day backcountry experience. We're also interacting with our users that are already using the products and are familiar with NWAC's tools. And that's really a two-way street for us. So we're able to kind of help people understand how we intended the product, as well as understand how people are interpreting it. It's the reason that all of our forecasters attend at least one Trailhead outreach throughout the season, because what better way to get real-time interaction with users and understand if the way we tried to communicate is being interpreted well by our users. And finally, we also gather data. We do that through a survey that we distribute at these trailheads, and we also just count the number of users that are heading into the backcountry. To take a step back and look at the program history, we started this as a pilot beta project in 2016. It was done entirely or led entirely by one volunteer who kept all of the Trailhead outreach equipment, the tent, table, pop-up under his dorm room bunk bed, and would make coffee in the morning to bring up to the Trailhead. There's been a lot of evolution since then. We no longer serve coffee at the Trailheads because that was pain. And we also trained over a dozen lead volunteers last year. So the program has really grown. And it's also a core part of our education and outreach program at NWAC. It's one of the programs that we really prize in terms of reaching our users. In 2019, we had a shift really related to our motorized users. We found that Trailhead outreach, the way we were traditionally running it, just wasn't that effective at motorized specific trailheads. And that's because snowmobilers, sled users are moving a lot faster. So by the time they get to that Trailhead, they're already zooming by and they weren't interacting with our volunteers. So we shifted that program and we now run a club ride program. So that's putting educators and forecasters out with already established clubs, the snowmobile groups. And they go out for a day and they interact with the folks on those club rides, and they're able to kind of interpret and help them use our tools more effectively. I think just a note for how important Trailhead Outreach has become as a program for us is that it was the only in-person programming we ran during the pandemic. We had to kind of adjust how the program worked with scaling down the number of volunteers and up the amount of PPE, but we were able to continue reaching people, and that became even more important as more and more people were using the backcountry, and that really spiked during the pandemic. And 2021, this past year, was one of our biggest years for the Trailhead Outreach program. As you can see by this great slide of numbers, we had a lot of volunteers this past year. Almost 50 volunteers donated 360 hours of their time, and I think it really highlights just how essential this program is and how big a part of it volunteers are. We couldn't do it without them. So while it is NWAC-led, it's pretty much entirely volunteer-run. And they were able to count almost 5,000 people that traveling past those trailheads and run 470 surveys, which has given us a pretty good data set for people that are traveling in the backcountry. This past year, these trailheads focused primarily on Snoqualmie Pass, 3 trailheads there, Stevens Pass, Mount Baker at Heather Meadows, and then also at Mount Hood. Because of the pandemic, we really scaled down the number of trailheads. It was just easier for us to coordinate. But as you'll see, we'll plan to scale those back up again this upcoming year. So a little bit about the survey that we hand out. In addition to the questions you can see here, asking some demographic questions, we also ask people about what type of gear they're carrying, what type of avalanche education they've had, where they're planning to head, whether or not they know what type of terrain they're going to encounter. Some of these trailheads interact with some pretty interesting avalanche terrain pretty quickly out of the trailhead, so trying to gauge whether or not people were aware that that's where they were going to be heading out. And it's given us some pretty good snapshots of who's heading into these specific trailheads. These are just a few of the pieces of information we've gathered through the survey. But we've had to expand our traditional categories of NWAC user types to include the just poking around folks, the hiking folks, the non-motorized sled community, to kind of encompass the sort of just plain folks. The people that are headed up, they're parking in the Alpental parking lot, and they're headed directly in towards Source Lake, and they might not be aware of what type of terrain they're about to encounter. We asked people what type of gear they were carrying. We consider rescue gear to be the transceiver, shovel, and probe, and then add airbag pack into that. So 65% of people that we surveyed were carrying all of the appropriate rescue gear. And we've found that 65% of people tends to be correlated pretty well with the snow sliding people. So that's the backcountry skiers and snowboarders. And the snowshoeing, hiking, just poking around, and non-motorized users were less likely to be carrying all 3 of those essential pieces of rescue equipment. And a positive spin, though, we had over 80% of people say that not only were they aware of NWAC, but they had checked the avalanche forecast the morning that they were planning to head out. So the data that we've been gathering at the trailheads, it gives us a really good look at some specific trailheads. It lets us know how many people were moving there, it lets us know what type of gear they carried, and we're getting a pretty good understanding for the places that we're able to survey really consistently. But what it doesn't do is allow us to expand that outwards towards other trailheads in the state of Washington and Northern Oregon. So we're not able to get a really full picture and understand how many people are going into the wintertime mountains. It's actually a gap that the wintertime industry has generally. And so this upcoming year, for our 2022 updates, one of our big exciting projects is working with a professional research team at the University of Washington to build a model that will allow us to take our current trailhead data and expand that out to other trailheads across Washington. We've raised $30,000 in grants and individual funding. That's all of the members here today are supporting. And the goal is to build this scalable methodology. So we'll be able to say, they'll be working with our trailhead outreach volunteers to survey folks and then be able to work across different trailheads in the state of Washington and Northern Oregon. So this is hopefully year one of a multi-year project. Additionally, we'll be hiring a trailhead outreach coordinator, not to be confused with our outreach coordinator. And this person will be working as a paid part-time position on weekends, so they'll essentially be attending the majority of our trailhead outreach events, and that's really to add consistency to the program, as well as relieve some of the burden on volunteers. So if working on weekends and recreating in the weekdays appeals to you, definitely reach out, and I'll have more information about that position. And like I said, we're also expanding. We're working with the UW to choose diverse trailheads that will allow us to have that model and be able to better understand who is traveling in the backcountry. And that data will not only help us evolve and improve our tools and allocate resources better across our zones, but it'll also help us gather data so that we're able to advocate for our wintertime users. Just want to call out that while I am delivering this presentation today, I'm not actually our staff member most involved with the program. That is our outreach coordinator, Katie Wicks. She can't be up here right now because she's running around making sure that this event runs smoothly, but she'll be the person that you can reach out to if you're interested in learning more about the program or getting involved as either a volunteer or as part of that trailhead outreach position that we're hiring for. I think the preferred hiring is open until November 18th. But that position will be open until filled, and we're looking to hire in the next month or so. Okay, great. That slid, but not the slide. All right, well, that's all I have. If you have any questions, you can ask now or at the working lunch. We can also talk about them.
Thanks, Charlotte. Looks like we have a question over there.
Yeah, I was just curious, as part of your...
Bring the mic. We have a mic coming.
Then I don't have to. Hello, thank you. So I was just curious about, are you tracking or trying to track diversity of your participants in the backcountry?
Yeah, we do ask demographic questions.
Awesome, thank you.
Question in the back.
It's a actually really interesting data set. I'm glad to see the program continuing. Do you know of any other avalanche centers that do similar outreach programs?
Yeah, the Colorado Avalanche Center started running a similar program, I think it was last year, and it's run kind of similarly. They do have a paid position that is able to travel around to the different trailheads, and I think that they have a much wider set of trailheads. I think they reached 74 last year, but a slightly lower number of users. We have really focused our trailhead locations on places that get a ton of use because the primary goal was awareness. So over the past few years, we've, Snoqualmie Pass, Stevens Pass, Mount Hood, places that a lot of people are moving through, and some of the avalanche centers have done it a little bit differently. Any questions?
Oh, we have one over here. Yeah.
So I know you keep a lot of statistics on observation reports by the backcountry user as well. Do you see more observations in zones where there is a extended trailhead outreach program? Or is it making differences in other statistics that you collect?
It's a good question, and I don't know that we could say causation or correlation because, again, the trailheads that we've been frequenting are ones that have just a ton of use. So is Snoqualmie Pass our highest observation set?
I think so. I believe it
Dallas
is.
says yes.
Yeah.
Dallas says yes. So that's where we focus a primary number of our trailheads, and it's also where we have the most observations, but it's also where we have the highest use. So tough to say. I like to think that people are seeing our tent and submitting observations. How many people here have seen the NWAC tent at a trailhead that they pass through? Okay, so a pretty good number of people have seen it. Yeah, any other questions? Oh.
We have one down in front. Yeah.
Are you looking to expand the data set into other categories?
Like what?
I guess in my mind, I'm thinking of there might be a pattern in where people source their gear from, people that are maybe renting or actually own the gear themselves, and if there's a correlation in that, maybe you could, I don't know, find the source of maybe the ignorance in the backcountry.
So is your question if we're asking folks like where they're getting gear from or how they're used? I think that right now our primary focus of gathering data has been trying to understand whether or not the tools we're providing are understandable, whether they're helping people travel, how we can make those, like our core products better. And I don't know at this time how we would expand to like other types of questions like that, but it's something to think about.
Looks like we have one over here. We'll probably take one or two more questions.
So you collect a lot of demographic data. What is the biggest trends that you've seen, like in quantity of users, et cetera, over the number of years, or anything that would be surprising? And then a follow-up to that is, do you share that information with land management companies so that they can better understand the traffic in their zones?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I can think of anything that would be super surprising to you. Use has increased massively over the past couple of years. There's a lot of people recreating in the backcountry. We do share that data. Actually, we share that data with everyone here. If you would like to see our Trailhead Outreach data, you can go to the Trailhead Outreach tab on our website. It's under Outreach Trailhead, and you can see the data set for the last few years. Our hope is that somebody will do something cool with it and let us know something that we don't already know about it. Obviously, we don't share any personal information on that, but we do share that data set widely for anyone who wants it.
I think we have one more question here.
Yeah, so my question was, the 85% is pretty impressive. Do you know if the causation of that, it's hard to say causation, but is that the tent work the main way that people learn about NWAC, or is that not something that you know right now?
I think that the tent work, causation would be hard for me to say, but I think the tent work is our primary in-person outreach tool, but we recognize that a way that a lot of people are finding their information is, of course, on the internet before they head out into the backcountry. So we've actually also done a lot of work with our search engine optimization, SEO, basically working to build content that allows people to find our website, so that if they're searching like snowshoe hike near me, NWAC is one of the websites that comes up, and it's not just like head here to go into the backcountry.
All right, thanks so much, Charlotte.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks again for joining us for the first session. So we're going to take a bit of a break. If you're joining us online, we'll be back here at 11:05. So feel free to take some time, stretch your legs, and be back here for the next session.